I've bundled for you the software you need to sell on these channels with the payment solution built in. So it's a 2-in-1 approach. Provide one service really well, you earn the trust to provide a more holistic solution. You as an entrepreneur need to be excited about the idea. If you want to be happy in your career, the only thing you need to do is be able to go to work when you want to go to work.
Welcome back to another episode of the Change Officer podcast that is brought to you by our friends at Poddster.com. If you're looking to start your own podcast but you don't have enough bandwidth to deal with everything that goes into podcast production, hit them up. The team at Poddster.com will be happy to support you with consultancy, tips and tricks, and production. All right. The number of online businesses has been growing exponentially over the previous couple of years. But this rapid growth was not followed by the regulatory bodies, banks, and payment gateways that caused a lot of small businesses to drown. Well, there is a new kid in block, and it's called Zbooni. Zbooni is a social commerce platform that is integrating social media like WhatsApp or Instagram and premium shopping experiences while helping small businesses to operate without too much bureaucracy. My guest today is Ramy Assaf, Zbooni's co-founder and CEO. Tune in to hear us speak about the challenges of building such a platform from the scratch and how to, in just a few years, build a business to 3,000 active small business users and over 150,000 customers. Ramy will share his major learnings, lessons, and give us some data-driven predictions for the future. Enjoy, everyone. Welcome to the Change Officer, Ramy.
Thanks for having me, man. It's an awesome show. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, man. Look, I love talking to entrepreneurs because being an entrepreneur myself, I know how many valuable lessons I can learn from talking with anyone who've been through this very bumpy journey of building a business.
Definitely, yeah.
So, and then especially I was curious to talk with you because, lately, you got so much attention, covers of magazines, podcasts, newspapers.
We had to bribe for most of those. So, yeah.
What happened then?
No, I mean, yeah, you're right. We're getting a lot of attention recently. It's our 15 minutes of fame, if you will.
So tell me, what happened in the last couple of months or last 6 months that surfaced you guys up in public?
Yeah, it's actually, it's a good question because the last 6 months wasn't much different than the previous 2 years. It's more like the market conditions just changed so dramatically. So I think the last 6 months was mostly the tailwind of COVID and the catalyst of bringing more businesses online at a faster velocity than ever before. And we were there prepared to sort of answer the call. And we responded with the same product we had previously, but it was just getting more attention and more valued, I suppose, than in previous windows.
And it's fun when we were preparing for the interview, you told me, man, nothing really changed. Yeah. We've been doing a similar thing for years.
Yeah, we didn't make any fundamental big changes to the product or do something crazy. It was just preparation, I suppose, for that time. And so we were fortunate to have worked so hard before that so that we were ready for it.
Yeah, patience. All right, let's just quickly introduce my audience for the ones who are not familiar with Zbooni. If you can just introduce us to Zbooni and what you guys do.
Sure. So Zbooni is a platform for small businesses who are looking to go online, create an e-store, do invoicing, manage their products and catalogs. And primarily they use it because they're often on social media interacting with their customers and they need tools to sell more effectively over those channels. So you could think of it as the tools you need to sell in a new digital era.
Mm-hmm. It's I remember when you were telling me the story, every founder has a story of how the idea came across their minds. And you told me a story about your wife that started selling hats online, and the business exploded, literally.
Yeah, I mean, the origin story goes back to 2016. Mm-hmm. And it was, my wife had basically, I was working at a venture capital firm. I was working with MEVP, not too far from here, down the street from here. And I was driving in the car with my wife, and she said, hey, you know what? I want to start my own business. And what are you going to sell? I was asking her. She's like, I'm going to sell hats. I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, yeah, I'm going to sell hats. Like, what's special about these hats? And I was asking her, grilling her of all these questions, because I was in that mode of a VC, like I'm going to ask the hard-hitting questions and, you know, kind of try and dismiss this. And she's like, listen, don't worry about it. All I need to do is put them up on Instagram. And if people want to order from me, they'll do it through DMs or WhatsApp. And so a few weeks later, she is selling hats, and they're expensive. And she starts selling like 5 hats, 10 hats, eventually doing like 100 hats a month, let's say. And this is all being done out of my living room at home.
And you're thinking to yourself, what am I doing wrong? Huh?
Yeah, I should be selling hats as well. So, you know, through that experience, I started realizing that, you know, the new wave of commerce had entered the picture, where we had these like notions of what it meant to start a business before. You know, 100 years ago or 50 years ago, or maybe less, you need to rent a physical space and put your products in there and get your licenses in order and do all that. And then enter internet. Oh, you don't need a physical space anymore. You can set up an e-commerce website to start selling your stuff. And then something interesting happened in a post-social era, where even the e-commerce website itself became sort of obsolete, and you could just go on social media and create your storefront there. So it was like this leapfrog effect because of social. So people like my wife, the barrier to entry to start a business almost had eroded to zero. I saw an opportunity there to build tools for a new mode of commerce, which was largely social-based or communication or chat-based. So that was the catalyst for the idea.
So to talk more about the problem that you're solving and the whole story, how, and they didn't see it coming. Mark Zuckerberg, when he built Facebook and when they acquired the Instagram, I'm not sure if they saw it coming, that people will be using their social networks to actually, you know, start businesses and sell stuff. But it's amazing how these products evolved. And it's interesting when you talk to anyone working on a product or entrepreneur or someone thinking about launching something, most likely your initial idea or the initial product that you're going to or value that you're delivering is going to be completely different to the value that we'll be delivering after 5 years.
Yeah, that's true.
And so talking more about the problem that you're solving, what's the bigger story behind the problem that you're solving?
So the problem was that the mode of commerce had changed, had shifted into these new channels, right? So it's very normal now for us to consider WhatsApp as a B2C, right? You can talk to businesses over WhatsApp, and now they have products for that. But that was, like you said, an unintended consequence of building such a thing. And it's very interesting, this chat commerce or conversational commerce, you know, it's been coined, these phrases, but it represents a type of communication between buyer and seller, which I'll call like the Goldilocks, metaphor, where if you're trying to sell products or sell services and you're using email as a channel, it's too cold. And if you're trying to pick up the phone and call your customers and deal with them over the phone all the time, it's too hot. And so chat is just right. It's just the right temperature because it makes a customer feel intimate enough, but also distant enough. So it's not too intrusive. And I can pick up my phone and look at it and respond or not respond, or I can allow it to interrupt what I'm doing or not. So it has these characteristics that are very interesting for consumer psychology.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happened when my wife started using Instagram to sell online, she didn't have a way to conduct transactions. So the only way you could buy one of those hats was by messaging her. So this was the new normal, right? Or at least that's how I saw it, was this new medium. And it looked like, from a consumer standpoint, when you give me the option of messaging you to order, it actually gives me a lot of comfort.
Mm-hmm.
It's not annoying, because they do want to buy stuff, but they need some peace of mind. They want to talk to you first, and they want to get reassurance that, is this really going to be delivered tomorrow? And can you customize it this way or that way? And what are these materials made out of? And is this gluten-free really? Because you didn't put that wasn't in the description. So all of that goes away when you introduce the chat component. At least it erodes it. So your likelihood of conversion is far higher.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because in the brick and mortar shops, a lot of people are annoyed by the real life chat that occurs. But in online, you are initiating the chat. Only when you want to talk, you're initiating the chat.
Correct. Yeah, that's one of the dynamics, right? Even you can't do outbound marketing oftentimes through WhatsApp. That's a paid thing. But inbound, you can respond.
So when obviously your wife started the business picked up, she was looking for the solutions, how to scale the whole piece of business of getting paid, collecting payments, etc. Were there any options out there that you could consider?
So good question. So when she was conducting her business, there was a lot of problems, right? It's like, okay, we solved for getting the orders in, but everything else was, spaghetti. And so it went from inventory management to CRM to order management to logistics, delivery to payments, the full spectrum of what you need to do commerce. So our idea initially was, let's build that solution end to end. And to be honest with you, we probably over-engineered the heck out of it, right? Because we could. And that's a dangerous thing, right? Like, if I can get engineers to build all of these things, why don't I just do that, right? And put it out there. The likelihood of you succeeding with A to Z is quite low. And so for us, we received, I would say, a lukewarm reception, okay? When we first launched the product. People were interested, some people started using it, and there was a lot of intrigue. Oh, this is new, this is different, we haven't seen this before. And then it was, we had enough traction, I would say, to sort of give us some ideas of what we should really focus on. And then we got a phone call, essentially, from Facebook. And in early 2018, they said, hey, you guys, we see what you're doing over there. We find it interesting. Why don't you come over? And they flew us out, and we spent 6 months.
So Facebook just called you up one day all of a sudden?
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow.
So, I mean, we had some relationships and people we knew there, but we didn't know that they were looking at us from the perspective of, this is a company we would want to incubate. So they had a one-off program in 2018. It was like a quiet, in-house sort of private thing. And they invited 8 companies from around the world. Almost one from each continent. In South America, I think they had 2. So we were the only one from this part of the world. And we get there and, we get this like red carpet treatment. And they're like trying to figure out, what do you guys know out there? And we're telling them, that people are using Instagram as a storefront, and then it's being sort of cross-pollinated with WhatsApp, and they put WhatsApp in their bios, and that's how commerce is happening. And they didn't know, right? And we think sitting here like Facebook knows everything. And they do. They have a lot of data. But that doesn't mean that they're always putting their finger on exactly what's happening everywhere in the world. So they were learning from us truly what was going on in this like commerce space, how it was being used, why. They didn't know that in Saudi Arabia, there are people selling sheep for Eid, for, slaughter. And because it's all done in Arabic, and there's too many accounts for them to monitor everything to the last detail. So in exchange, they opened up to us as well. And they said, look, here is what we're doing. Here's what we're thinking about doing in terms of our commerce and our strategies. And we think Instagram is an interesting place for shopping, and we want to introduce new things to WhatsApp. And they showed us, their roadmap effectively for the next few years. So a lot of the things we're seeing today launched, we saw that a couple of years ago. And there's things we've seen that the public hasn't seen yet, which are quite interesting.
Tell us about it.
I mean, there's some confidentiality and stuff, but there's a lot of experimentation with WhatsApp and how you can use WhatsApp, like being able to log into a website with a WhatsApp ID, or using WhatsApp as a discovery tool. So I think there's a lot of kinetic energy still sitting within the WhatsApp universe that hasn't been unleashed yet.
You joined Facebook's Incubator back in 2018, right? And then they helped you, obviously supported you in shaping Zbooni into what exactly?
Okay, so when we say shaping, it was more like, what are you learning during this experience? Because they're not going to define your product for you, but you can gather enough insights to determine what it is you should be focusing on. And for us, we saw that the writing on the wall was, this idea of them wanting to get into commerce it's an inevitability. So the opportunity we saw was, well, nobody has aggregated the long tail of merchants in the Middle East to the extent that you can have something viable to plug into, right? And that was one takeaway, right? Is if you're going to do this, you have to build a huge mass of merchants and enable them with the right tools centered around the ability to accept payments. So we said, let's go one order up and solve for this issue across the board through a mobile product. So we're narrowing down the scope, you could say. And when we did that, things inflected for us at a new rate. People started, and the reason was because when you're focused on solving a particular issue like that, you design your workflows around solving one thing really well. You can crack it versus coming out with 10 features and hoping for the best. So we poured all of our energy into solving this problem. The issue we saw in this market was there's a lot of payment solutions.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to that's what I was curious about back in 2018. I think that was just 2 years ago. 3. Oh man, it's 3 years ago. There were solutions for getting paid online. You could go to any of the payment gateways, build your own website, or set up an e-commerce store, integrate, go to the bank, all of that stuff, and be set up, right?
It sounds simple, and on the surface, it sounds like there's no real issue there. But when you actually try to do that, see what happens. A payment gateway, okay? Go to them. What a payment gateway is, so let's demystify this a bit. A payment gateway is essentially a middleman between you and an acquiring bank that provides payment acceptance as a solution. Right? So what they're doing is they need you to fill out an application, and they're going to take that application, which is probably 30, 40 pages long, and it needs to know everything about you. It needs to know how long you've been in business, who your customers are, who your vendors are, everything. What are your terms and conditions? Show us the website you have published. What sections do you have on your website? What is your return policies? It's not for the average small business owner to get through very quickly. It's overwhelming. And they take that application and then they submit it to an acquiring bank. And the acquiring bank has to ultimately put a stamp of approval on this and say, we will underwrite this and we will provide a merchant ID to this merchant. So your goal when you go to payment gateway is to get something called a merchant ID, which is not a big thing. It's just something that identifies that these transactions, you're the beneficiary of them. And they have different category codes and etc. So that part of the journey can take several months, like 3-4 months. And you feel like this really, euphoria when you get a merchant ID, like that was an accomplishment. Well, it shouldn't take that long because in the States, if I just flash a social security number, they say, here's your merchant ID, right? It's almost like an instant exchange. It doesn't work like that here or in a lot of the emerging markets. There's a big obstacle. Banks aren't set up to do the proper sort of KYC procedures and risk mitigation and assessments. So they're very cautious with how they dish out these merchant IDs.
And basically for anyone like your wife, for example, who's just starting quickly, an individual, probably she didn't even have time to set up a company.
You're correct.
You can think about setting up an online business. Right.
For her, she's like out of contention from day one, right? No one's going to give her a merchant ID. But for people who do have a trade license, who are set up properly, some of those banks will ask you for 2 years audited financials.
Which is impossible to have if you're starting, right?
What are you going to do if you've been in business for 6 months? You're just not going to have payments on your website. The systems aren't designed for that because that same process that they have to go through, it's the same process for all the big airlines and hospitality companies and luxury retail groups, etc. So it's not a level playing field for everyone. So the opportunity we saw was to build a system that could overcome some of these challenges. So when I talk about solving for payments, I don't mean just from how our app behaves in the workflow. I mean behind the scenes how we work with acquiring banks, work with payment gateways to create an opportunity to aggregate merchants through a marketplace model or an aggregator model. So this aggregation model is a bit disruptive to what was available in the market here. So when merchants come to us, we're doing our own KYC on them and onboarding them and using our discretion and using technology to do our risk mitigation efforts to add them to our marketplace. And when we do that, we're absorbing some of the risk, which is why we take the KYC. So, we curate who joins the platform. Mm-hmm. And we're careful about it, but it's the fastest path for those merchants. And the end solution, the end value proposition to a business is I've bundled for you the software you need to sell on these channels with the payment solution built in. So it's a 2-in-1 approach, which is quite powerful in a time in a market like this.
So how long is the process for someone who is looking to set up this quick way of making some money online with you guys? How long is the process of setting up now comparing to thinking even about doing it the traditional way?
I mean, it's largely self-service. So you can download the application. You can create your profile, your store. That gets submitted to us for a review. We go through some procedures. It can take, if you're ready, 20 minutes to start selling online. But it doesn't take long if you have the
and I can start accepting payments immediately.
Yeah.
That is powerful. In one of the previous interviews that I listened, you said that your guys are essentially a marketplace, right? You can be defined as a marketplace. Amazon is a marketplace as well. Now, when you say Zbooni, Amazon marketplace is the same, but it's not the same. What's the difference between a marketplace that you have and a marketplace such as like Amazon?
Well, I think marketplaces there's some constants. right? It's an aggregation of third-party sellers using one unified platform to sell their goods and services. I think the difference really is how the traffic is directed to that marketplace. What we're seeing is it's more like an Etsy, right? Where if you're an Etsy seller, you're using your social channels, and if you want your customers to buy from you, you invite them to your Etsy store. So that's the mechanics we use. So each merchant is kind of bringing their own customers to the marketplace, which is, I think, a more prudent way of driving traffic rather than, creating all these ads and adverts to bring customers.
No, it is. It sounds like a bulletproof model at the moment. You've said that obviously lately, and it's a rapidly changing market, evolving, and at the moment you're solving a big problem that is existing in this market. But you mentioned that, it's a question of whether this will be a problem a couple of years down the road. All right. What's your strategy with Zbooni for maintaining the positioning that you are now establishing as a growing company? What's your strategy to stay there?
Yeah, so things change, and right now it looks like everybody is trying to go digital. There's the short-term element of that. So I know that you just purchased this product and you paid through this card. And so we can digitize a transaction. But what that's telling us going forward is we know what you bought, we know when you bought it, what else you bought. There's a set of data, and that data set becomes very valuable to help do re-engagement, help do loyalty, help do remarketing, to contain the customers in this realm and add more value to the merchant base so that they can use this to drive further demand. The idea is if you can provide one service really well, you earn the trust to provide a more holistic solution. So that's the path that we're following at the moment.
Interesting. And you mentioned data, and you sit on a relatively large amount of data at the moment. How many active users do you have as of today?
We have close to 3,000 active businesses.
3,000 active businesses, which is how many transactions? A lot. So tell us, who's making money these days? What type of businesses are making money these days?
Yeah, good question. That's an I could charge you for that question. But
we're going to split equally, all right? Everyone who's listening, let's chip in.
So I think the takeaways for us over the last year, for me, the insight is there are businesses out there that are quickly commoditized. All right. So if I'm selling a physical product like, coffee coasters or table coasters, whatever, the businesses that are doing the best are offering something far distinguished from that. So, if you come to my clinic, okay, and I can do a skin treatment and make you look 10 years younger, what's the cost? What would you pay for that? There are these categories where the promise of the product or service is actually in the arena of, I can give you your happiness back or your freedom back or these sorts of notions. And it comes across you can do that in multiple ways, but the common thing is probably anything that has to do with self-help, wellness. These are very popular in today's world, and people are spending, and I think they value that much more than before in pre-COVID times because they realize when you're just sitting at home, that's all you have. So how do I get that?
That's interesting, and that's probably working well with what's actually going on last couple of years. How much would you pay for me to make you a millionaire? Follow my course, exactly. 10-hour course, but I'm going to teach you Tai Lopez style. But it makes sense. I mean, they're selling you on that personal self-satisfaction,
and some of them are good at it. I mean, some of them deliver.
Yes.
And it's often those businesses get the best reviews and get zero complaints from customers. They're happy.
There is something there, yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely something. I mean, some of them, not all businesses, will thrive, right? And our job is to provide, it's like the metaphor, providing the tools to the gold miners, but there's people striking gold out there. It's happening.
No, absolutely. Evan, thanks for sharing the insights. Exciting story. And I'm sure there is a lot more to come. I want to switch gears now a bit. I think whatever happened over the previous couple of months, it was a good, exposure for you guys. And I'm sure that it's going to bring you a lot of attention and deserved, attention from the audience. But I want to talk more about you. So, tell us a bit more about, young Ramy. Help us visualize young Ramy.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. I mean, this is not, I wasn't prepared for this.
That's what we're looking for.
Sure. So, I mean, I was born in the U.S. to an immigrant family that moved to the U.S. Looking for better opportunity. And my father he was an entrepreneur. And he came to the States. He had worked in Saudi, in these, he was like a civil engineer, basically building roads, asphalt, a tough job. And he said, okay, he's had enough of that. He's going to go to the States. And
when was that? 19...
well, he sent us first. So that was like early 80s.
Uh-huh.
And we set up in California, which was nice.
That was a good option, good choice.
And, he invested and he did a couple of different businesses. And a lot of them failed. And then a few stuck. And then, he was quite good at finding something that would work and then expanding on it. And I don't know how much of that I knew at the time was affecting me, right? And he would explain what was going on in his businesses to me. And I was the only son. I was the youngest of like 4 kids and the only son. So I think he would tell me more than he would, than I realized he was telling me about business. And so by the age of 15, 16, I'm part of that generation that's like transitioned from analog to digital. So it happened like, I had a Walkman playing a CD, and then I got the iPod. And so I was part of that generation, like a lot of us are. And I knew that this new digital side that's where we should bank on that. That sounds good. I was a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
And in California, it was not a crazy idea to be an entrepreneur and start a digital business, so that was just like built into me.
I think that you were maybe just a bit late to catch that perfect wave.
Probably
in Palo Alto.
I missed the, .com bubble for sure. Probably a good thing. There were some learnings from that, but I was going to school and I thought, okay, well, I wanted to be a lawyer. So I got into law school and did all that. And I was like, I'm going to defer because I want to test my luck with setting up a digital business. And I just remember my dad had kind of bestowed this insight to me when I was younger, where he's like, my parents weren't the typical, you have to become a doctor, you have to become this, that. Thank God they weren't. They were just like, if you want to be happy in your career, the only thing you need to do is be able to go to work when you want to go to work, not because someone is watching the clock and timing you. If you can do anything that has that freedom, you'll be happy. It doesn't matter how much money you're going to make or whatever. That's your ultimate happiness will come from that. And again, some successes, moderate successes, some failures. And then I was like, maybe what I should do is be the investor, because it's tiring to keep doing these projects. So if I could invest, I could pick the winners. I can identify the winners, and then we'd bet on them, and that sounds much better. So I tried that.
Quick money.
I thought that's just going to be easy. So that was 2013, and it wasn't easy. Nothing's easy, but it gave me a lot more exposure to seeing 700-800 pitches a year. I used that experience and it actually fueled me. But to be frank, during that period, I felt like a little bit of a phony.
Mm-hmm.
Like in the back of my head, I'm like, who am I to judge if that's a good idea or not? Like, what do I know? I mean, they're the entrepreneur. They're the ones supposed to be predicting the future, not me. Like, so I never felt fully comfortable doing that. And I thought, you know what? When this opportunity came back to come do another startup, get the band back together and do another one, I took it.
But couple of questions that I wanted to ask you, but let's go for this one. You were all right. You started off as an entrepreneur, and I think probably part of one of the reasons is because your father kind of. Were there any lesson that your father was teaching you at the time you were not aware of it, and later on you said, "Oh, now it makes sense"?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, he's suave. Like in business, people like dealing with him. He's very charismatic, and he would make friends. And I realized that's an important thing. People like you; they want to do business with you. Mm-hmm. That's one. Two is he would go into details about the cost of his products. And if he raised the price by this much, he'd be worried that the volume would decrease by that much. What do you think? So I was indoctrinated very early on into like, oh, okay, like you can make decisions based on your critical thinking that are, and I don't think a lot of kids get that. It's always like, no, when you become an adult, then you're allowed to start thinking about these things. And business decisions are for grown-ups only, and you have to meet these parameters. But I thought, we had broke that mold early on.
It's a bit of a rich dad, poor dad analogy.
I suppose so, yeah.
If you had a chance to read the book. The second question I want to ask, you were with VC. How did you decide to again leave? It was a paid job after all. To leave this comfort zone and go work for a startup again and start from scratch. Was it difficult?
It was difficult because that idea that you're talking about, where it's comfortable and it's like, a lot of people want that job. To be a VC, it sounds like you're at the top of the totem pole. In reality, it's a bit nerve-wracking. It was really tough, right? To bank on the entrepreneurs out there just giving you these crazy returns, because the market, there can only be as good as the market would allow them, and the market size and addressable markets and etc. And it was early on. So I thought I felt out of control, and right, like I have to go to sleep at night hoping that these other people are delivering and executing.
And that's not a good feeling.
It's not a good feeling. So I thought, well, I might as well take some control over my destiny, or as much as I can. So I know how much I can contribute. I know how much energy I can give or effort I can put. Let me get my hands dirty and do it myself.
And then you went all in.
Then I went all in.
In one of the articles that I was reading about your story, I came across a sentence that says, thanks to Assaf and his team, Zbooni quickly progressed from being just an idea, to a startup that very recently raised $5 million in a Series A funding. Now, what caught my attention here is that I saw this as a typical way of promoting an idea of entrepreneurship and a startup, because someone like a random person thinking about starting a business maybe now, or thinking about entrepreneurship, they're like, damn it, another story of a guy who came up with the idea and quickly raised $5 million in a Series A, and now he's living a good life.
Not true at all. Yeah.
Was it quick?
Yeah, I get entertained by some of these media, sentences, like the buzzwords that are thrown around. It wasn't quick. It was a long process. The idea, it was for us, I mean, you as an entrepreneur need to be excited about the idea enough to where you can validate it quickly with customers. It doesn't really matter what you think. It's ultimately what your customers are, telling you or showing you. And that's the easy part. That's the easiest part. So I always like to, I like to see people socialize their ideas, to get validation, to get feedback, to refine it. I'm much more impressed when someone does something, even if it's ghetto, to validate their idea in a non-scalable way. So I that's what I would advise.
And absolutely. I think I always, because of one of the businesses that I'm engaged in, which is basically helping other people build their own stuff, digital stuff. Very often I'm coming across a lot of people with ideas who are afraid to share the idea with me and asking for a bunch of NDAs, etc., and not disclosing the details. And every time I'm also trying to consult them that, sharing the idea is just going to help you, reframe or improve the idea that you have. I cannot steal it because it's about the execution. And that's what I want to ask you. There is a book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. Have you read it maybe? Or heard about it? Ben Horowitz. Interesting book. Some of them say that it's the best book they ever read. What was the hardest thing about the hardest things that you've been through over the previous 4 years building Zbooni?
We had a lot of obstacles from the business environment, right? I don't know what's the one hardest thing. Mm-hmm. There's a series of them.
Of course.
When a woman gives birth, there's like a biological phenomenon that the pain and that experience and the trauma of childbirth, it's so severe that if the mother were to always remember it, she would never have a child again. So biologically, something happens that starts to erase the trauma of that. And that's an attribute I have to give to most entrepreneurs. If you need to have that, you need to be able to erase the trauma because otherwise you won't have the will to do it again and keep delivering over and over. So I can tell you a few of the challenges were investors didn't appreciate what we were doing at all. A lot of them still don't because this is new. This is different. So we had to speak to tons of investors to find ones that had the guts to invest in something that wasn't, this playbook that they could point to.
And I can imagine how challenging it is to stay confident, believe in your idea when you're continuously coming across people who are telling you, it is not going to work, or I don't believe in it, or start challenging you, asking you tough questions. What's your way of staying focused, motivated, confident? Do you have any tricks that you do or things that you do throughout the day, reminding yourself, reflections and stuff like that keeps you focused and confident about it?
The most important thing is knowing how you affect your customers, right? And I stay in touch with a lot of the customers, and our customers, we're very blessed in this business that I'm in. We deal with small businesses. Small businesses are way more interesting than enterprises because there's personalities behind them, there's people behind them, there's interesting stories. They have courage. It takes courage to start a small business. And when we know we're affecting small business, it gives us a feeling of, a bit of a heroism, right? So we get that feedback from our customers, and we have a lot of compassion for our customers.
It fuels you up. They say, going back to what you said about entrepreneurship, they say entrepreneurship is one of the loneliest jobs that you have, but at the same time, the most rewarding job that you can have when you hit the highs. But the lows and the highs of entrepreneurship are
it's extreme.
It's extreme. So there's this interesting movement called How I Fucked Up. They're throwing up these events, fuck up nights. And excuse me, French, everyone. But it's the name of the event. What can I do? And they're throwing events here in Dubai as well. Super fun. What they do, they bring in people who are talking about their failures. Because we are living in the world where everyone is celebrating successes. And, you open up your Instagram that we mentioned, everyone is super successful, rich, and driving Lamborghinis around Dubai and,
right.
Staying at Ritz and Burj Al Arab. But the truth is behind every successful individual, there is a lot more actually failures and lessons that they've learned. Do you have any story or an experience that you fucked up or that you failed, but that taught you a lesson or set you up for later success, but maybe you didn't see it at the time? Or do you have a favorite failure of yours?
I think there's something we screwed up. I screwed up. Our business model early on was so levered to providing shipping and logistics solution, which is not even something we offer today at all. And I was so married to this idea that was going to be our business model, was going to be centered around that for too long. I would have probably moved on much faster. That's one screw up. I think in general, I don't have too many regrets though. I mean, I'm just happy that
Hashtag no regrets.
Hashtag no regrets. Everything happened for a reason, I suppose.
Yeah. There's also an interesting book written by Ray Dalio that you probably heard about, especially growing up in the States. Principles. And he is writing about his life and work principles. Have you heard about it or maybe read it?
Yeah.
So yeah, then you know what I'm talking about. Do you have any of your life or work or both principles that shaped you or that you are trying to stick to in life?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that's how you deal. Now, when we started the company, we were 4 people. And now we're not a huge company, but we're 34 people. And it's my job now is to make sure that those people feel motivated, feel excited. And I don't want to be the boss that's telling people what to do. Okay? And I know that I don't want to just tell people what to do. I always want to tell people why we want to do it this way. And I want everyone in the company to understand why we do things in a certain way. And so that's very important to me, that principle, because I want people within the company to feel attached to what they're doing, have the same compassion and have the same feel of contribution as someone who started the company. So I think that's an important thing to maintain.
What's your vision? Do you see Zbooni as a 100,000 people company, 10,000 people company, or 500 people company?
Ask me again in 2 years that question. Let's see where we are.
Ramy, thanks for coming, man.
Thank you for having me.
I enjoyed the conversation thoroughly. I hope you guys enjoyed as well, and that we managed to inspire you, that you picked up some interesting insights about what Zbooni is doing and how you guys can contribute to this market and the very evolving industry. Stay tuned. There is another episode coming out next Monday. Until then, if you like what we're doing here with the Change Officer podcast, please like and subscribe and leave any comments or feedback in the comment section below. Ramy, thanks again for coming.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.